You want to make this sound more like this for free? Well, then stay tuned because I'm going to show you how. Hey all, MrSpwn here and welcome to my media channel dedicated to giving you info, advice, and tutorials on how you can improve your live streams and the content that you create. Now in this video guys, I'm going to teach you how you can take that terrible sounding cheap headset mic and make it sound professional. And this will work for any microphone, not just headset mics. And best of all, it's 100% free. Now the headset I'm using to demo this for you here today is the Sadie's SA902 7.1 channel virtual USB surround stereo wired PC gaming headset over-ear headphones with mic revolution volume control noise cancellation LED light black red. That's a mouthful. Now guys, when I bought this headset mic a few years ago, it was about $20 and it's still about $20 today. So it should give you a pretty good idea of the significant improvement you can make to a cheap microphone, whether it be a headset mic, a cheap USB microphone, or a cheap XLR. Now guys, before we dive in, I wanted to give you a taste of what this headset mic is going to sound at the end of all this. So right now, you should be hearing the headset mic completely raw, just like if you plugged it in and you just went with it. And already you hear tons of background noise and it just doesn't sound very good, kind of noisy, staticky. It just sounds terrible. And now you should be hearing the headset mic with the little tweaks that we made. And doesn't it sound way more professional and just a million times better? Now guys, when I first started creating content on YouTube, all I had was the headset mic on my HyperX Cloud Stingers for my audio, and the audio sounded terrible, especially compared to the audio that I've heard on other people's YouTube channels and other people's live stream. And now when it came to improving my own audio, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I was literally on the front row seat of the struggle bus. So of course, I did what anyone would do. I went to Google, I smashed into that search bar how to improve my audio, and I found videos and articles that showed me some things, but they never really gave me the sound that I liked or sound that worked well for me. So I want to take the opportunity to make this video to give you guys a more complete guide on how you can improve your audio better for your voice for free. That's right, for free. Now one caveat to this guys is if you have a wireless headset like mine here, these are the SteelSeries Arctis 7s. These are a fantastic wireless headset. But just like any wireless headset, the audio that comes in from the microphone is plagued by extremely heavy compression. So while you can still make some significant improvements with the things I'm going to show you here, it will not sound as good as if you used a wired headset mic or if you used a cheap USB microphone or cheap XLR. So if you do have a wireless headset, I would heavily recommend picking up a cheap USB microphone where you can take the tips I'm going to show you here today, apply them, and make it sound incredible. Now, if you don't know what microphone to get, I got your back. I'll put some links down in the description to some cheap USB microphones that you can use that will sound great. And along with that, guys, any of the products I've talked about so far or end up talking about, I'll also put links down in the description for those. But now, with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright guys, so here we are in OBS. Now, the tips I'm going to show you here today will work with OBS or any OBS-based product like Streamlabs OBS. Like Streamlabs OBS or OBS Live. OBS. So to accomplish what we're doing here today, we are going to be using filters. Now, if you don't know what filters are, essentially they're just a chain of effects that you can apply to your audio or your video. Then OBS takes your audio and your video and then it pumps them through those chains of effects and then outputs the result at the end to either your recording or out to your live stream. OBS. Now, before we get started, we will need to install a third-party VST plugin. Now, VST plugins are essentially small software applications that you can use as filters within OBS. Now, the plugin set we're going to be using are the Reaper VST plugins, and they are amazing and 100% free. I put a link to the download page in the description below. Just give that a click, select the installer for your operating system, download it, install it using the default settings. And the reason for the default settings is because where they install by default is where OBS looks by default for VST plugins. And then once those are installed, we can move on. Now, if you already had OBS open when you did install them, make sure to restart OBS so that it picks up the new plugins. Now, before we can add filters, one of the things we want to do is set up monitoring in OBS. What this allows us to do is hear ourselves back through OBS, so that way we can see exactly what's happening as we add each filter and tweak each filter's settings. Now, to set up monitoring, it is 3 easy steps. Step 1 is we want to make sure that our microphone source has the correct audio source as its source. I said source a lot. Now, usually if you've just set up and ran OBS the first time and you haven't tweaked any of the settings, your audio source for your microphone is likely set to default, which is going to be Windows default recording device. Now, for most people, that's okay, but if you're like me and you have a multi-audio stream setup, that's not going to work. Plus, if you ever decide to change your default recording device in Windows, it will affect your OBS microphone source as well. So to make sure you have the correct audio device as your audio stream for your microphone, it's super simple. We're just gonna head over to the mixer, and in the mixer, you'll see your audio sources. Now, if you are on a single audio source setup, the mic aux is likely going to be your microphone source. If you're like me and you have a multi-audio stream setup, it may be different. Quick side note, if you guys ever want to see a video on how to actually do a multi-audio stream setup, just let me know and I can hook you guys up. Like I said though, most everyone, mic aux is going to be your microphone audio source. I'm actually recording with my microphone and the headset mic. And so what I did is I actually added another audio input capture device and I called it Audio Sadie's headset. But like I said, likely yours is going to be mic/aux. You're just going to find that in the mixer, you're going to click the settings cog, and then you're going to click properties. You'll end up seeing a window that looks like this, and for device, just click the menu and select your audio device. Once that's selected, you're just going to click OK. Now for step 2, we want to make sure that the device for monitoring in OBS is the headset or the speakers that you want to hear yourself through. Now to do this, we want to open up settings. Now your UI might look different than mine as I've moved things around and customized it, but by default, you should see the settings somewhere down in the bottom right. I have it right here. So now you should see your settings. All we're going to do is we're going to go on the left here, we're going to click advanced, and we're going to find the section that says audio. Now on audio monitor device, we're going to click the menu and we're going to find the device we want to listen to ourselves through. In our case, it's our headset, which is speakers USB audio device. So just give that a click apply, and then click OK. Now on to step 3. Step 3 is to actually listen to ourselves. We got to tell OBS to send that audio input into our monitoring device so that we can hear ourselves as we make these adjustments with the filters. To do that is very simple. We're just going to come up here to edit, and we're going to click advanced audio properties. And once you do that, you should see your advanced audio properties settings. You're just going to find your input device. For most of you, that's mic/aux. In our case, since I have a dedicated audio input capture for the headset, it's the Audio Sadie's headset. You're going to come over to audio monitoring, you're going to click that, and then you can select either one of these. Now, monitor only means that it'll mute the output of that audio device, so OBS won't output it at all. Monitor and output means you'll hear it and OBS will output it. One thing to note is if you're going to do test recordings as you change settings or after for your end result so you can hear the differences, make sure you click monitor and output so OBS will still output to your recording. So for our case, that's what we're going to do because obviously I'm trying to capture both audio sources while we're doing this. That's it. You should now be able to hear yourself in your headset or whatever audio device you selected to be able to hear yourself through. And it should be super weird and kind of awkward because it's always weird and awkward to hear yourself while you talk. And then you never really sound the way you think you sound. And then, you know, it's weird. Now, the very keen of you may have noticed that I am now wearing the headset. That's because, guys, as we go along, I'm going to go ahead and switch between my nice mic and the headset mic. So that way, when we add each of the filters and make the tweaks, you can hear the difference. Man, I got that right out the gate, yo! Now, adding filters to an audio source is extremely easy. Just like we did before, we're going to find our audio source in the mixer, and we're going to click the settings cog, but this time, we're going to select filters. Now, this is going to bring up your filter options, and here, we're going to end up adding 5 total filters. Now, let me paint the scene for you. Have you guys ever gone to a live stream where when they're not talking, you still hear all the background noise, mouse clicks, and keyboard clicks? And then you've gone to another live stream where you don't hear any of that and you wonder, what's the difference? Well, that difference is what is called a noise gate, and that is our very first filter. To add a noise gate, it's very simple. You're just going to come over here to this plus sign, you're going to give it a click, and then you're going to select noise gate. Now you can name it whatever you want, but I suggest naming it exactly what it is, so we can leave it as noise gate. Then just go ahead, click OK, and now you see the noise gate settings. Now a noise gate's exactly what it sounds like. When it's closed, it doesn't let any audio through. However, when it's open, it lets all the audio through. This is important, especially if you are a gaming live streamer, because as I've already explained in the scenario, this is going to do things like blocking your keyboard and your mouse clicks and your background noise when you're not talking. Now to go through the settings, I always start with the open threshold first. This is because the open threshold defines the minimum amount of noise required in order for that gate to open and let sound pass. Determining what your open threshold should be is as simple as talking to yourself. So really, all you're going to do is talk to yourself in a somewhat quiet but level tone while you adjust your open threshold higher and higher. What you're looking for is points where your sentences start to get cut out. Once that happens, you're going to take your open threshold and you're going to back it down a few, so that way you guarantee that whether you talk in a level quiet voice or you get excited and talk loud, that noise gate's going to open in either scenario and let what you're saying through.
So now I've gone ahead and thrown you guys over to the headset mic so you can hear what I'm hearing right now, and we're just going to sit here and we're going to talk in a kind of quiet level tone like this. And then all I'm going to do is each step of the way, I'm going to sit here and say something else, and then say something more now, a bit more. Now you guys hear that quiet sentence get cut off, and that was at -14. So let's go ahead and back it down. Okay, now I'm at -17. Quiet, it's still cut out, so I'll back it down a little bit more. Maybe -20, and now I'm going to sit here and talk in that same quiet level tone. So everything came through, so -20 seems to be a good open threshold to let everything through.
Now the next setting to determine is your close threshold. Close threshold just defines what the maximum amount of noise is before that gate closes. Obviously you want this to be less than your open threshold, and you could sit there and talk to yourself and kind of try to figure out what closed threshold is, but it's going to be a lot harder to do than the open threshold, just because while you're sitting there talking, it's hard to determine at what point the audio dropped enough to be cut off at the proper point, if that makes sense. So good general rule of thumb that I found that works well for me and most other people is to take your close threshold and bump it down about 5 dB to 7 dB below your open threshold. But we're just going to go ahead, we'll set it at -25. Now your attack time is how quickly that gate determines whether or not it needs to open. And as streamers and content creators, not all of us are talking all the time. So ideally, we want this to be as low as possible. So that way, once we begin to speak, the gate opens quickly and we don't have to worry about the beginning of our sentences getting cut off. So I like to set this at 1 millisecond. Now your hold time is how long that gate waits before it determines if it needs to close or not. So if you're someone who talks kind of like this and you pause between your words a lot, you might want this to be higher. And I actually tend to do this while I'm live streaming, just because sometimes when you're in the moment and you're focusing on the game, but you're trying to communicate with your viewers at the same time, you end up taking these kinds of pauses. So I like to have mine relatively high. I actually keep mine around 200 milliseconds. That works best for me. If you tend to take longer pauses, maybe you want it a little bit higher. And if you tend to speak super quickly and say everything you need to say all at once, you might be able to knock this down a little bit shorter. Now the release time controls how quickly or slowly that gate closes once it determines it needs to close. Now if you're someone who is like the average human and you tend to trail off your sentences, especially when you're focused on a live stream, you're gonna want this to be higher. I personally like to put this around 200 milliseconds just because I do trail my sentences off. But if you're somebody, once you're done talking, it's a hard cut and you don't trail sentences or anything, you can get away with a lower time here. But generally, a good rule of thumb is to have this a bit higher. So like I said, I like about 200 milliseconds. That's it. That's the noise gate. So what I'm going to do now, guys, I have the noise gate disabled, and I'm going to throw you over to the headset mic and let you hear what it sounds like without the noise gate, and then I'll enable it and let you hear the difference.
So now guys, I have you over to the headset mic and I'm just going to be silent and I'm going to let you hear all the background noise. And now guys, I have the noise gate enabled, and now I'll let you hear what the background sounds like while I'm not speaking.
Now there's an obvious huge difference between the two. When the noise gate's on and I'm not speaking, you guys hear nothing. You didn't hear any mouse clicks, you don't hear my PC fans running, nothing. It was nice and quiet. Now some of you may have noticed that there is still an issue, and that's when I'm speaking. That's because when I begin to speak, the noise gate opens and lets all sound through. That includes the background noise and the mouse clicks that we want it to be out of the audio. But that's where filter number 2 comes into play. The next filter we're going to add, guys, is what's called a suppressor. And the job of the suppressor is to, well, do exactly that, suppress. So when that noise gate opens up and it's letting sound through, what the suppressor is going to do is it's going to analyze the profile of that sound, match it against a profile that it's already built up of our background noise, and remove that background noise from that audio. Now that sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually super easy, and it's going to be the very first VST plugin that we use. So to add a VST plugin, it's the same thing as adding a normal OBS filter. You're just going to click the plus sign, but this time we're going to select VST 2.x plugin. Once again, call it what it is, the filter. Now in this menu, guys, where it says VST 2.x plugin, you're going to hit the menu and we're going to select Refer Standalone. Now you can go ahead and click Open Plugin Interface, and you should be presented with this menu. So the first thing we want to do is actually disable our noise gate. That's because the noise gate's going to be closed, blocking out the background noise, and we want that background noise coming through so we can build up a profile of that background noise and have the suppressor, well, suppress it. So all we're going to do is we're going to come up here and click the eye icon on the noise gate. Now with the noise gate disabled, while I'm not speaking, you're going to see these lines bouncing up and down, and that's the background noise being picked up on the mic. So now the very first thing we're going to do is under edit mode, we're going to click precise. This is because we want the precise profile to be removed from the audio. Now the FFT size kind of determines the quality. Now the bigger the number here, the better the quality, but the more demand for your CPU, and the smaller the number, the less demand, however, the less the quality. Now the default of 4096 is perfectly fine and should work for everyone. Now for the most important part is the mode. We're going to hit the drop down and we're going to select subtract. And once you select subtract, you'll see this checkbox appear that says automatically build noise profile. But what we're going to do is be completely dead silent, and then we're going to give that a click and let it build up the noise profile of the background noise. And for an added bonus, we're going to throw in a few mouse clicks and keyboard clicks so that those get added to the background noise profile as well. Was that uncomfortable enough for you? Once we're done letting it build that noise profile, we uncheck the box, and now we have this nice red line, which is the profile of our background noise. Now, one thing I do recommend doing, especially if you're using a headset mic, just because the headset mic's so close to your mouth, is to actually rebuild this audio profile doing the same thing, then breathe. I can't tell you how much I hear people while they're in the moment, in their game, and they start breathing heavy because it's intense, and you hear them breathing, and it drives me nuts. Even more awkward for you? Now guys, just like I did last time, I'm going to throw you over to the headset mic so you can hear the difference.
So now I have you guys on the headset mic and you hear all the background noise, whether I'm quiet or whether I'm speaking. And now I have the filters enabled and you guys don't hear any of the background noise, whether I'm quiet or whether I'm speaking.
Now the third filter, guys, is what's called a compressor, and it's an extremely important filter. Now the job of the compressor is to compress. Basically what it does is it takes your dynamic range. If you don't know what the dynamic range is, it's the difference between your highest, loudest points and your softest, quietest points. And it compresses them together. And what that does is it gives you a more level sound. What's nice about having a more level sound is, one, you don't have a huge variance in your audio, where your viewers' eardrums are getting blown out at one moment and the next moment they're cranking up the volume because they can't hear what you're saying. The other aspect you get from a more level audio stream is that it sounds more humble, more warming, and a lot more pleasant. To add the compressor, guys, once again, we're gonna click that plus sign. And this time we're selecting compressor. Once again, name it what it does and click OK. So now you have the compressor settings. This first setting is the ratio, and this is determining how much compression is actually occurring. It's an X:1 ratio, and what this means is that for every 1 decibel it goes above your determined threshold, it tries to compress it by X amount. Now, if you're somebody like me and you have a ton of variance in your vocal audio, you're going to want a higher ratio. Personally, I use a 10:1 ratio. Now, if you're somebody else who talks very level at all times, you're going to want a smaller ratio because you don't need as much compression. A good way for you to determine this is, one, you can listen to yourself. You can either monitor yourself as you talk, or you can record something and listen to it back, and you can hear whether or not you're all over the place or you're very level. Now, another way and a way more guaranteed way of knowing what your vocal variance is by using a software application like Audacity or any other one that you have that can show you your audio waveforms. Now, if you look at your audio waveform within the software and you see that you have a ton of spikes everywhere, you have a high vocal variance and you're going to want higher compression. Once again, like I said, for me personally, 10:1 works really well. This is something you're going to have to play with and determine what works best for you. Now, the next setting is your threshold, and this is actually an extremely easy setting to get right. All we're going to do is look in the OBS mixer, and we're going to see as we speak this black dot bouncing up and down. Now, this black dot is what's called your view meter, and basically it's measuring the pressure of your audio, and it kind of gives you a more realistic idea of loudness. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth of what audio pressure is, but just know it's a very good indicator to determine at what point we need to start compressing our audio. Now, as I sit here and talk, I see this black dot bouncing up and down, and it seems to bounce up and down kind of around -25. You see it go above and below sometimes, but it seems to be kind of averaging around -25. So that's where I'm going to set my compressor threshold to. Now, your attack time is exactly the same as the attack time in the noise gate. It's how quickly the compressor determines whether or not it needs to start compressing. Once again, we want this as low as possible. Now, the release time, again, exactly the same as the release time in the noise gate, except this time, it's how slowly it releases the compression. Now, personally, I like to match my release times all together to the noise gate, because if you go above it, it doesn't make sense because the noise gate will be closed and no sound's coming through anyway. So I'm just going to set it to 200 milliseconds. Now, this next setting is an extremely important setting. So as you compress your audio, your loudness of your audio actually gets lowered. And that's because the highest points are getting compressed down closer to the lowest points. Now, the reason output gain is important because if one, you're like me and you have a high ratio, you're going to have a lot of compression occurring and it's really going to lower the loudness of your audio. This is a problem because if you have teammates in Discord or you have some background music or the content that you are streaming is louder than you are, you're going to be drowned out. And now the second reason it's important is because if you bump this too high, you're going to start introducing clipping into your audio. And clipping sounds terrible. In fact, here's an example for you to listen to of clipping, and you can hear just how awful it sounds. We want to make sure to get our output gain correct, so that way it's loud enough we're not getting drowned out, but not so loud that we're going to introduce any kind of clipping. And really, side note, we're going to be adding a filter later on that kind of takes care of clipping. So if you get a little bit too loud here, it's not a huge deal, but you still want to get it right. Now, to get your output gain correct, it's actually pretty simple. Personally, I like to have my vocal output be around -5 dB. Now, some people suggest doing -1 dB, that way your max loudness without introducing clipping, but like I said, I like to use -5 dB. I found this to be loud enough that I'm not being drowned out by my teammates or the game I'm playing, but it's not so loud that my viewers have to turn it down and lose the ability to hear the game clearly or to hear my teammates clearly. So this number is going to be a little bit personal to you depending on how loud the things are within the content you're creating or your live stream. But like I said, a really good starting place, try -5 dB. So to determine the output gain that we need, all we're going to do is sit here and watch our audio as it bounces up and down while we're talking. And we're going to kind of see where it averages at and where it peaks at. Where it peaks at is this little dot up here, and obviously where it averages at is kind of where this line sits while it's bouncing while we speak. And so what we have is anywhere between about -15 to -20. And now what we want to do is take the middle of those two values, and here that's about -17. And then what we're going to do is take the difference between the -5 being our goal and that -17, which is 12. Now that'll bring our output up to about -5 to -10, which is perfect for what we're going for. If you end up finding that that's still too quiet compared to everything else, you can obviously bump it up, and if it's too loud compared to everything else, you can obviously bring it down. Now this last setting, guys, don't worry about this at all. Personally, I would recommend never to use sidechaining and never to use ducking. Sidechaining is basically having audio alongside of your audio while you speak, and ducking means that when you speak, your audio is going to remain level, and then all the other audio that is not your vocal audio is going to be lowered automatically. Now, ducking sounds like a cool idea, but trust me, it's not. It sounds really awful, really terrible when the audio is a certain loudness, and then when you speak, it cuts down. It really sounds weird and awkward and unnatural. And personally, like I said, I don't know a single streamer that does this. But once again, guys, it's now time to listen to the difference that we've made.
So once again, I have you on the headset microphone with none of the filters enabled, so that way you can hear how terrible it sounds compared to the audio you're about to hear. And now guys, I have the filters on, and you can already hear the dramatic difference that we've made to this cheap headset mic.
For free. Alright, so the next filter we're going to add is an EQ filter. For those of you who don't know much about audio or sound in general, basically sound is carried through the air in a wave, and that wave is broken up in a frequency range. Now, the lower the frequency number, the lower and heavier and bassy the sound is, and the higher the frequency number, obviously the higher the sound. Now this is important to know because we can produce amazing effects by just taking parts of the audio each different frequency and either boosting it or lowering it. Now to do that, we use an EQ filter. Now the EQ filter we're going to use is actually the VST plugin. So we're just going to click the plus sign, we're going to click VST plugin, we're going to name it EQ, and then in the menu, we're going to select RIA EQ standalone. So once you click open plugin interface, you're going to be introduced with the EQ settings. Now it looks a little bit crazy, but it's extremely simple. Now, what I'm going to do, guys, is actually have you on the headset mic through this whole process. That way you can hear the difference that's made as we tweak each part of the frequency band. I'm also going to do a two-step edit. The first one is going to be a general rule of thumb edit that a lot of people use just right out the gate, a simple starting place. And the second thing I'm going to do, guys, is tweak that to fit my voice to show you how you can do it for your voice. And the reason for that, guys, is every voice is different. So what works for me may not work for you. Now for the general rule of thumb, guys, and the way that this works is on the low end you want to boost it, the high end you want to boost it, and then the midtones you want to lower it. That's because the low end provides presence and gives you a nice bassy sound, and the high end provides crispness and clarity to your audio. The midtones tend to muddy the water a bit and kind of add a, well, just a not so pleasant sound.
So now I have you guys on the headset mic as we go through phase 1. And like I said, that's just going to be the general rule of thumb. So what most people do is they go to their low end and they boost it by about 9 dB. They go to their high end, boost that by about 9 dB. And they go to their midtones and they lower those by about -2. And now what you should be hearing is me being a little bit more bassy, a little bit more present, but also very clear and very crisp. Now, if you guys like this sound at the end of the day, you can go ahead and keep this and just stop there. But if you want to go that one step further and tailor it to your voice, then we're going to move on to phase 2. So what I'm going to do here for the first step of phase 2 is that I'm going to sit here and I'm going to actually watch where my frequency bounces around as I talk on the low end. Now, if you notice as I talk, my frequency on the low end doesn't really peak around 100 Hertz. I actually seem to peak at about 130 Hertz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change point 1's frequency to be at 130 Hertz. And now as I talk, oh yeah, I sound way more present. It sounds way more full and just kind of gives me a warming broadcaster sound. Now for the next part of phase 2, we're going to do the same thing for our high end. So once again, I'm going to sit here and watch as I talk to see where I kind of peak at my high end. Now if you notice, my high end as I talk kind of seems to peak right around 3000. So I'm gonna go ahead and change this from 5,000 to 3,000. And oh yeah, I sound way more clear, more crisp, and it really fits the tone of my voice a lot better. Now for step 3, guys, it's just gonna take kind of understanding your voice a little bit better. I know personally my voice is very mid-tone heavy. If you're somebody, your voice is very bass heavy and you have a really deep voice, you may not need to take this step. And if you're someone who on contrary has kind of a higher voice but not very mid-tone heavy, you also may not need to take this step. But what I do for my step 3 of phase 2 is I actually lower my midtones a little bit more. Personally, I like to be at -4. And now you guys can hear how much better I sound making those very small tweaks to just the general rule of thumb. So like I said, the general rule of thumb sounded good, but this sounds even better. We've made it great for my voice, and you can do the same thing to make it great for yours. Now a bonus step, and this is completely optional, but I actually highly recommend it because it adds kind of a roundness to the low end of your audio, which really gives an overall better rounded sound for the whole audio stream. Now what I'm talking about, guys, is as I sit here and talk, you'll notice on my low end, it kind of dips down and then it flatlines right here. That flat line is what I kind of think of as the electrical buzzing sound of your voice. Now what that is kind of a low end hum, and it's not something you really notice consciously, but subconsciously you do. And trust me, when you remove that, you definitely notice a difference. Now to remove that, it's extremely simple. We're just going to add what's called a high pass filter. And to do that, we're going to click add band, and then we're going to sit here and talk and see where that flattening kind of occurs. And for me, with my voice, that seems to happen kind of right around 75-ish. So we're going to set the frequency to 75. And so now we've cut out that low end hum, and yeah, my voice has a lot more roundness and fullness to it, and it sounds significantly better than just using the general rule of thumb for EQ. Now guys, I have you on that headset mic with none of the filters. It just sounds so bad. And now I've enabled all the filters and we sound so good.
And now guys, you've heard how good we sound. You think, oh, that must be it. No, we got one more filter. Now guys, the last filter we're going to add is actually super simple. It's called a limiter. And all the limiter is going to do is it's going to limit you from achieving a peak higher than the threshold that you set. Now if you remember back when we were setting up the output gain of the compressor and I told you about clipping and I said we're going to add a filter to prevent you from doing that, well, this is that filter. To add a limiter, guys, you're just going to click the plus sign, you're going to click limiter, you're going to name it limiter, and then you're going to come over here and set it to -2. Now, the reason for -2 is because I've actually seen in some cases the limiter allowing loudness or decibel level slightly above the threshold that you set. So if you were to set this at -1, there is a chance, though it's a rare chance, but there is a chance that it's going to go above -1, potentially above 0 and cause clipping. So I personally use -2. Now for your release time, guys, you can just set this to 200 to match your noise gate and all is golden. Now guys, as one extra added bonus, and not actually for free, but something you could totally do to add a slight improvement, especially to your headset, is to pick up a windscreen that is specific for headsets. The purpose of the windscreen, guys, is to help you stop things like plosives, the p sounds, and it really helps with the S sounds as well. And if you notice when I switch back to the headset mic previously, you can really hear the S's coming through really defined, and it's kind of annoying and harsh on the ears. This will help prevent it. But like I said though, it makes this for free tutorial not necessarily for free. It's not something you have to get, but I do recommend you do get it, and I have a link in the description below for the ones that I have. That's it. With these 5 filters, you can take virtually any microphone and make it sound a million times better. So much so, your viewers are going to have a hard time determining whether you're using a cheap headset mic like this one, or a nice fancy-dancy external microphone. So guys, hopefully this video helped you guys understand filters a little bit better, understand audio a little bit better, and overall make you sound more professional, giving your viewers a better viewing experience. So if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that like button. And if you found this video useful, or you used the tips that I gave you here and made your audio sound better, let me know in the comments below. I love to hear success stories. You guys can also leave me comments for ideas for future videos to know what you guys want to see in order to improve your live stream and the content that you create. And if you guys would like, you can check out my live stream at twitch.tv/MrSpwn. Currently, I stream Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays starting around 2 to 3 p.m. US Mountain Time. You guys can also check out my gaming YouTube channel, both links in the description below. Anyhow guys, that's it for this video. Once again, I hope you found it useful. And I also hope you guys have an awesome, amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!